Now, anti-Brexit activist Steve Bray has returned to Westminster despite facing prosecution under new anti-protest laws. The Police, Crime, Sentencing and Courts Act, which came into force on Tuesday, introduces an offence of intentionally or recklessly causing public nuisance in an attempt to crack down on disruptive guerrilla protests of the kind used by climate crisis activists. Bray is known for his musical protests outside the House of Commons, but police tried to shut him down when the new laws came into effect. I'm joined now by Toby Young from the Free Speech Union. Thank you for joining us, Toby. Ordinarily, we would be probably sitting here having a chat about him being an annoying Ramona, but this is a freedom of speech issue. Should he be allowed to do that protest?
Yeah, I think it's a slightly tricky one. At the Free Speech Union, we have a rule whereby we won't defend people if their right to free speech is curtailed, if they're trying to exercise that right to curtail the rights of others to exercise their right to free speech. It looks as though Steve Bray, on occasion, is using intimidation, in-your-face harassment in order to try and shut down the speech of his opponents. He goes up to well-known Brexiteers with his loudspeaker and shouts in their faces in an unpleasant and intimidating way. He plays very loud music. So the question really, for me, is he using his right to free speech to try and stop others using theirs? And if he is, I don't think I could defend him. I think the solution here is to say, look, provided you keep the volume reasonable, provided you don't use electronic amplification or a loudspeaker, and provided you're in the designated area, then of course I would defend your right to exercise free speech, to protest outside Parliament. But if you're going to go outside those areas, follow people down the street, get in their faces, play really loud, amplified anti-Boris music, then I think you've crossed a line.
I'm not sure what anti-Boris music is, but I'm surprising it's not doing better in the charts. But I know, I take the point.
I'll tell you what it is.
The same way of asking the same question would be, surely if he was actually harassing people, harassment was already illegal. But this new law that comes in is, well, people have debated on this very channel about whether there are some freedoms that are being curtailed by this idea of a noisy protest. Are we no longer allowed to protest noisily if that's the biggest crime that he's doing?
Well, I think, as I understand it, the new prohibition on noisy protests, which on the face of it does sound draconian, only applies to individuals. So a crowd of protesters can be noisy. There's no prohibition on that. I think if individuals want to be noisy in a way that causes a public nuisance as part of a protest. And Steve Bray, I think, does fall into that category, which is why this new prohibition has been applied to him. I mean, I think it is a tricky one, but I think, he clearly doesn't want to act reasonably. He's not willing to negotiate with the police. I think they've said to him, if you just turn down the music a little bit, and by anti-Boris music, I didn't mean to single that out as music which should be prohibited under this new law. He plays an adaptation of the Bay City Rollers song, Bye Bye Baby, whereby the lyrics are Bye Bye Boris, but incredibly loudly outside, the Treasury building. I mean, if you work in there, it must be intensely annoying to hear it day after day after day. And you get the impression that, the reason he isn't being reasonable, the reason he isn't kind of just adapting his protest a little bit so he can continue to protest, is because he wants to be a martyr to the anti-Brexit cause. He wants to be banged up. I think you can be jailed for 6 months under this new law. And I think he wants nothing more than to be sent to prison so he can become, the Brexit one. And people will protest outside the prison to free him and God knows what. I mean, I think, I do think that people should certainly have the right to protest, particularly outside Parliament, particularly, in large groups. And if individuals want to protest, they should be welcome to do it too, and we should defend their right to do that. But if they do it in such an irksome, noisy, deliberately unpleasant way, over a really long period of time, and if they're belligerent and aggressive when anyone tries to reason with them, then I think, it's harder to have much sympathy for them.
That is quite a big megaphone we can see on screen right now. So at least you could probably ban the length of a megaphone that big. But so I think it might be unfair to ask the question this way, but I'm going to do it anyway. So you, Toby Young, from the Free Speech Union, it sounds like you like the new rules that have been brought in.
I don't like the new rules that have been brought in, but I don't think I think people have been exaggerating the extent to which they curtail free speech. I do think that sometimes individuals being extremely noisy with a view to disrupting people's working lives, making it difficult for them to go in and out of their offices. I mean, no matter how worthy the cause, do we think, would we die in a ditch to defend their right to be, a nuisance over a long period of time using an enormous megaphone or a massive amplifier in order to kind of shout at people and try and shut them up because you believe so passionately in your cause?